Today's project, a Carter 2413 fits a 56 Chrysler Dodge with a Hemi. If you want to order a kit for your pump, get the number that's stamped in here. This particular one starts with an M, 2413, and ends with an S. This is the number that you'd use to identify it. A lot of people have been using this MO number, and all that tells me is it identifies the body. It doesn't identify the arm or the valves or the fuel section or anything else other than the body. This body can be used on a number of different pumps that use different castings and different arms. So we're going to go through it, freshen it up, get it ready to go back on the car. First order of business, grab it by one of these ears in a vise. It's easy to work on because you're going to be working on the top of this. We want to mark the location of the top fuel casting in relation to the bottom casting, the body. You can take a picture of it from overhead, draw a picture of it, scribe a mark, do whatever you have to make sure that this goes back on the same way it came off. It'd be a good idea to mark this top piece too. It can go on wrong, but the pump won't work. But you can put it on. There's two different ways it'll go. So make that mark. We want to remove these. This particular pump has 8 screws. Most of the Carter pumps have 6. The bigger ones, like the ones for this Hemi on this particular Carter pump, to use the 8 screws. So remove the 8 screws, and you'll gain access to the valve area. Once all those screws are out, take that casting off. You run into these 2 screws. These 2 screws hold this cover on. Usually it takes a pretty hefty screwdriver to get these out. Now you got to separate these 2 halves. More times than not, it's stuck, like this one is. What I do is I take a putty knife, and get rid of some of this overhang that's here. You want to get to separate these 2 pieces. Oh. This is the pulsated diaphragm, and I still have no idea why Carter decided to put a screen inside the pump. If this gets plugged up with debris, your pump stops. Maybe it's planned, but anyway, this gives you access to your inlet and outlet valves. This is the outlet valve. These 2 here. The fuel will come in, the diaphragm will go down and pull fuel down through here, goes back up, pushes it out through the other valve. Don't skip this process, this step. We want to knock these valves out. Take a 1/8 inch punch right in the center. As you can see, that centerpiece. Just tap it lightly and it'll drive it out. The old valves, throw all this away. You're not going to reuse any of that. Don't be tempted. Hot as a rock. Not supposed to be. Now I wanted to show you all this white right here. This is all from using fuel additives, octane booster, whatever else you dump into your fuel tank. It all piles up in here and eventually makes its way down through the valves or through the out. It comes up and it'll wash all this through and send it up to your carburetor. And imagine the inside of the carburetor looks just like this. If you're going to use fuel additives, don't throw a can in every single fill up. Unless you run the gas tank down to next to nothing. All you're doing is multiplying it. Every time you throw in some more, if you get down to a half a tank, and then throw in another can of additive on top of what you've already had in there, all it does is adds to it and it keeps building up, and then that's where you end up with all that sludge in there. Anyway, this here, in order to get this diaphragm out and replace it, we've got to get the arm out. And that process is to remove that spring. Hang on. Okay, once the spring gets out of there, much down inside of here, a lot of the Chrysler products, a lot of these Carter pumps, to use a little hairpin clip that sits right inside of here. Grab a pair of vice grips, a pair of needle nose pliers, grab it and pull it out. It's a little bitty thing, but without it out of the way, you won't be able to get this arm out. You got to remove this soft plug, aluminum plug. I just take a chisel, go on either side of it, and just work it back and forth, and it'll pop it right up. Most of the time. It's only a little small thing. Once that's out, take your needle nose again, grab the pin, and just slide it up. It's the groove. Where are you? It's the groove that that clip sits in. Take a little pressure off and slide the arm out. And the diaphragm will come up. This is where the arm goes, right in there. There's your diaphragm and your spring, and this is the seal. As you can see, the seal's gone bad, which rotten oil up into here, and it would eventually come out through this little hole right up in here. This is the vent so that the diaphragm will work. Anyway, these are going to take a trip through the wash tank, and then we're going to bead blast them. We're going to clear coat them. We're going to flatten out all these surfaces, and then it'll be time to reinstall. We'll be back shortly. Now that everything's all nice and clean, clear coated, make sure these surfaces are flat. There, and the body. Anywhere that the rubber diaphragm is going to separate the two, like between these two halves, between this half and the body, they need to be flat. And I go one step further and flatten out this area so that you'd end up with no oil leaks. Okay, let's put some valves together. These are our valves. This is what we came up with to replace that mushroom that Carter supplies. Rivet, spring, plate. Simple. Set it in the hole. Get a punch and set it right in the center, and very gently tap it down. Just keep at it. It'll work its way in. Just make sure you start out in that hole. And let it come through the bottom about maybe 1/16 or 1/8 of an inch. Just about like that. It's probably more like a 1/16. Two more valves on this side. Now this pulsated diaphragm, we want to block off this hole. Not like that. Get my arm out of the way. We want the fuel to come up into here and be forced to go out through that hole. And fuel is going to come up through here. You can go out that way. Or actually come in that way. Not going to go out. Come in, go down. Oops. Line up the holes, put the screws in. run one of them down till it stops, not hard, and this one, give it a good twist. Now with this area all sealed off, you should be able to blow air in and not suck air out. Same thing with this one here, be able to suck air out and not blow it in. Perfect. Onto the body. Get your diaphragm assembly that you got in the kit. It'll look like that. If you take this body and set the diaphragm on top of it, you'll notice that it's about half of a screw hole too big. The diaphragm is a little bit bigger than what the diameter is on these holes. While it's in this way, if you push it down, the holes will start to line up. There's a reason for that. It has to do with the geometry between where that pivots and where the camshaft sits, or sometimes it's a push rod that hits this. But anyway, all that goes on in there, you want to tend to fold this up. If you match it up, I already put it away, but if you match it up to the other one, you'll see that the original one, it's got like a bump to it like that. It's intentionally made bigger. It keeps the diaphragm from wearing out prematurely, and gives it room to grow. Now, in order to put this arm in, we want to push the diaphragm down. You can just see the end of the pull rod right through there. That's where that fork is going to go. And it holds it in there. Put the pin in. Just move it around. Just hang on to the diaphragm in case it becomes unhooked. Move it around, and the pin will eventually slide through. Just make sure you push it all the way down. Press in that new aluminum plug. Get your spring back in there. Mount it back in the vise. Give it a couple of test pulls. Make sure that it is hooked in there and it's hooked in good. And this is the time to line up those screw holes. So it's roughly in the right area. Find your reference mark so that this will go back on exactly the way it was when it came off. There's a couple of advantages to having me do it here in the shop. First one is a glass beading, making it nice and clean, clear coating it, flattening out the surfaces. I put in new screws. You can too when you order a kit, order the screws to go with it. One of the other advantages, among quite a few, is the fact that I test them. Make sure that there's no leaks. Okay, get two screws caught opposite each other. Now in order to get some of these done, remember I told you the diaphragm's a little bit bigger. I take a small screwdriver, move that diaphragm a little bit so the screw goes through the hole. Sometimes you get lucky, you can just move it around. And what you don't want to do is cut new holes. And I'll show you why as soon as I get the rest of these screws caught. Now with the diaphragm spring pushing this diaphragm up, it makes the screw holes come a little closer together to make it easier for it to catch them. See, what you don't want to do when you're doing these particular ones, these especially on the Carter pumps, because they make them, the diaphragms a little bit bigger. AC is real closer together because they just don't have the geometry that Carter does. You just want to make sure that the diaphragm doesn't fold over on itself. Being up like that is fine. Having a wave in it right around where the screws go. But like I said, just don't make it so that the diaphragm doesn't fold over on itself. If it does, start all over again. Now what we want to do is get an adjustable wrench, put it on the arm, use it for leverage. Pull that diaphragm up till it stops. You can see it pulling in. Pull it up till it stops. Now tighten down the screws. Get at least 4 of them done. Before you release the arm. Now what you're doing is you're preloading the diaphragm. It keeps the screws from stretching out, keeps the diaphragm from stretching out, and it makes the diaphragm last a lot longer. Every time it stretches, it tears the fibers inside that hold the rubber that holds it together. It actually bonds the thing. But it ends up tearing it, and then you get a leak. It stops pumping. You're sitting on the side of the road because this gas is pouring out everywhere. And just kind of go around, double check, make sure you got every one of the screws. Like I missed that one. You snug them down. Just keep in mind that you got a screw that's going into cast aluminum, and they're not all that god awful strong. Now to test it, put your finger over the inlet, pull up on the arm, and you can't do it like that. While it's up, block off the outlet and let it go. That tells you that you're sealed here. You're sealed up around the top. The diaphragm plates are sealed. Everything's good. And if you could get to that vent, which on this one you can, just block off where it's open, and that'll tell you that the oil seal is doing its thing. This baby's ready to go back to the customer. It's all done. Put a gasket on it. That brings us to the end of this video. If you'd like to order a kit, remember, give me the number off of this mounting flange. Sometimes they'll ask for this casting number, but that identifies the whole entire pump. This will get them close to it. Give them the application. Give us a call, 781-335-8860. On the web is then-now.com. If you haven't done it already, subscribe. Don't forget to hit the little notification bell. And stay safe. Thanks for watching. Any comments, leave them down below. Thanks.